Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing all? I hope you are doing well, staying healthy, enjoying life, and must be planning to improve your life. Here we are to do so. Here daily we read a chapter of a novel to develop reading habit to improve our English, including reading, writing, speaking, vocabulary at the same time enhancing our knowledge. As we know, reading is the best practice to develop all these things which help us in many ways. And reading could be one of the good hobby to make a change in our life. As we have heard from many prominent personalities that books change their life, add values, widen their knowledge, we can live other life by reading a book and get all those experience and learn from their mistake. So why to commit same mistake if we can learn from book and improve our life? So join me in this journey to become best version of ourselves. Before starting, I would love to hear your thought in comment section. Remember to like, share with your loved one to change their life as well, and don't forget to subscribe my channel. Press the bell icon for daily updates. Today we are going to read part 8 of the novel Your Dreams Are Mine Now, which is written by Ravinder Singh. In the previous video, we have read about that Rupali was looking for that lady peon from nearly a week to but she was unable to trace her. One final day, she found her in the garden of a campus. After recognizing her, she walked toward her, but couldn't ask anything related to that incident because there was other lady peon also present there. So she made a excuse that she need a maid for her room cleaning. That lady suggested Rupali someone else on her behalf, but Rupali persistent request she agreed to come to her hostel room in evening after completing her day's work. When she reached there, Rupali made her sit on chair and questioned her about that incident. But she was hesitated, scared. Rupali hugged her, made her comfortable to tell that what was happening there and what was all those incident. After comforted, comforting her, she assured her that she will do something. So she shared everything with Rupali. But when there was a knock on door, so she got up from her chair and wiped her eyes and about to leave, but Rupali said to relax and opened the door. There was Saloni in her sweaty t-shirt and a shorts with a basket in her hand. Then she spotted Rahima there. Rahima is that lady who is a lady peon. Her name is Rahima. So when she looked uh, at the Rahima there, so she didn't get anything. She looked back at the Rupali. Before questioning her anything, Rupali cleared that she had called her for some work. And after that, she asked Rahima to leave with her phone number. She gave a phone number and asked to leave. When Rahima leave, so it was a dark when she reached her home, and she found that the Professor Mahajan was sitting on a chair and stroking the head of Rahima's daughter, who was busy completing her assignment. So this was the story till the seventh part, and today we are going to read a eighth part and see that what is there. So let's read and see that what happened next and what we can get from this chapter.
8. A week later, the elections were over. The winning party from the previous year had come into power for the second consecutive time. Meanwhile, Dew had seen various clashes where the police had to intervene to maintain law and order. On one occasion, it had to take a few students into custody. But that was only for a few hours on the eve of the election as a precautionary measure. While the elections had gotten over and the peace in the university had been restored, Another storm was preparing itself to engulf the college. The signs of it were first felt in Professor Mahajan's cabin, a day before classes were to resume. That's where the bugle of the battle was blown for the very first time. May I come in? Rupali asked from the entrance of Professor Mahajan's cabin. Professor Mahajan moved his eyes from his laptop to the door and replied, I am a bit busy. Come in an hour or so. Sorry, sir, but this can't wait, Rupali responded urgently. What's your name, girl? The professor asked. He certainly didn't like the manner in which Rupali had spoken. Rupali Sinha, sir. Listen, Rupali, I remember you. You had reached out to me for the doubt clarification last week. I was away for a few days. We can discuss that in an hour. Come back later, he said and raised his hand signaling her to leave. When Mahajan resumed looking at his laptop, Rupali spoke, This is not about my project. Then, Professor Mahajan asked in irritation, for Rupali was not allowing him to concentrate on his work. Sir, we need to talk, Rupali said and stepped inside Mahajan's cabin without waiting for his due permission. Her behavior annoyed Mahajan. No one had ever dared to speak to him like that. He didn't approve of Rupali's audacity. He shouted, How dare you walk into my room without my permission? For a second Rupali backed off, but the next minute some inner strength told her to move on. In her mind, Rupali knew what she wanted to do. She had already prepared herself. She walked towards the professor's desk. This is about Rahima. I know what you do to her, sir, she said in a calm yet confident voice, staring at the teacher's face. Her heart was beating wildly inside her chest. Professor Mahajan had heard the name crystal clear without any iota of doubt. His face was something to be looked at. His mouth fell open, and in that moment he seemed to be at a loss for words. Being confronted so directly and unexpectedly, Mahajan felt as if he had lost the ground beneath his feet. Clearly, he wasn't prepared for this, not even in his wildest dreams. All this while, a determined Rupali kept looking straight into his eyes. She could see the acceptance of wrongdoing in them. Rupali crossed her arms against her chest and waited for Professor Mahajan to react. When he got over the surprise, he attempted to ignore the topic. Who and what the hell are you talking about? Listen, I am busy. Please come later. Okay. In response, Rupali smiled and pointed out, Sir, seconds back you were shouting at me. What's made you soft now? Is it the fear that I know what you do to Rahima? She hadn't arrived at Mahajan's cabin to leave. She was there to talk. She did not shy away from telling him what she knew. After establishing the facts, she told the professor that they both knew that he was wrong. With a dash of daring, she asked him to stop what he had been doing to Rahima, failing which she would have no option but to report the matter to the higher authorities. There is no way I will let you exploit poor Rahima any further, she said firmly, while the professor looked at her, his face red with anger. Rupali's determination to confront Professor Mahajan was based on Rahima's agreeing to protest against him. A day before, she had called Rupali's phone and told her that after she had left from Rupali's place that day, she went back home to find the professor there with her daughter. Before she could even think of saying anything, Mahajan had said, Your daughter is a good student and willing to learn. While I was waiting for you, I helped her solve a maths problem. If she wants a tutor, I can help her on the weekends. I won't charge a penny to teach her. You can send her to my place. And he looked back at Rahima, smiling a sleazy smile. Rahima's blood had boiled seeing Mahajan in her house, running his filthy hand on her daughter's head right in front of her. His lust had now brought him to Rahima's daughter. That's it. I can't take it any more. I will do anything to get myself out of this dirty man's clutches. Rupali was happy to learn that Rahima had made up her mind to fight. She was equally furious to know the reason for the change in Rahima's stand. Her daughter was the sole reason why she sacrificed her own modesty. As a mother, she would never want her daughter to become her replacement for an animal like Mahajan. And if, God forbid, that happened, then all her sacrifices would be meaningless. She was therefore not left with any other choice. Professor Mahajan got up from his chair. He hissed angrily, "You little upstart. You don't know who I am and what my powers are. Now I will show you what's the result of behaving with your faculty in such a manner. You will have to pay for all these fake allegations you have made against me." Rupali stood still and looked at the entrance of the cabin. "Didi," she called out. Rahima appeared at Professor Mahajan's doorstep. The professor was again shocked to realize that all this while Rahima had been standing outside, listening to what was being talked inside. "None of my allegations is false. The victim is here. She'll verify my statement," Rupali said. "I see," Professor Mahajan said, looking at both of them. "So if you bring anyone in my room and convince her to say all that you want her to say, does that prove anything?" Then he moved towards Rahima and sneered, "You. Look at you. I helped you get a job here and you are conspiring against me. How dare you? Sir, I want you to say sorry to Rahima and promise us that you will not come in her way ever again," said Rupali, who was now right behind Professor Mahajan, completely ignoring what he had just said about Rahima. That further agitated the professor. He turned back and shouted, "Shut up." Pin drop silence filled the tense space of Mahajan's cabin for a few seconds. Neither of the two ladies spoke. Rahima was very worried. She wanted all of it to be over soon. She had anticipated that things would unfold like this. But when she was at that very spot, she felt uneasy. Till that day, she had faced Mahajan in a closed chamber, in a privacy that had always made her suffocate. But that day, she was in the open, in the presence of a third person who was willing to fight on her behalf. That day, she raised her voice against the man she had undeniably obeyed for so long. However, that did not take away the latent fear in her heart, the fear of facing Mahajan. And that day, she was not just facing him, but also going against him. "Who is behind this? Who has sent you to?" Professor Mahajan turned back and probed, trying to give it a look of conspiracy orchestrated by his political enemies. Rupali clarified, "No one is behind us. All we want is that you stop what you have been doing. Else. Dot. Mahajan cut her short. Else. Else what?" It didn't take Rupali too long to clarify her position. "Else you will leave us no choice but to report this to the principal and other higher authorities in the university." In a state of rage, Professor Mahajan turned around to stare at Rahima. He was like an injured animal wanting to make his mark. Rahima shrank under his angry gaze. The poor lady didn't have the guts to look at him. She was too scared to even be in that room. When Mahajan felt that he had overpowered Rahima with his gaze and didn't know what to do next, he turned and walked up to Rupali. He stood in front of her and looked into her eyes, without saying anything. Rupali matched his stare in response. She saw sheer hatred for her in his eyes. How could a teacher be so immoral? Weren't they supposed to be even higher than God? Then what made them fall so low? She thought about what her father had said, and that gave her strength, and she stared right back at him with the same hatred he had shown her. A few seconds passed. But Professor Mahajan didn't shift his posture and kept staring at Rupali with his furious eyes. His silence was loud. There were certain moments when Mahajan's proximity and the wrath he showed without uttering anything made Rupali feel uncomfortable. She could hear the raucous breathing of a furious professor who was brashly staring at her, unable to absorb his anger. Mahajan could have done anything to her. Rupali knew this, but she didn't want to step back either. The heat of that moment was turning Rupali cold. But every time she felt scared, she urged herself to be strong. She kept reminding herself that she shouldn't back off, for she was fighting for the right, and that it was the professor who should be scared, for he was the culprit. Rupali wanted Professor Mahajan to speak. She wanted to engage him in a conversation. But with every passing second, Professor Mahajan was transforming into a beast. His face was turning wild, his eyes red, and his breath louder. It was horrible for Rupali to look at him. Fearing something unpleasant would happen, Rahima started pleading. But her words failed to register in anyone's mind. At one point, Rupali could feel the sweat on her palms. But she didn't give up. She continued to overcome her fear and managed to hold her eye contact with Professor Mahajan. Mahajan began shuffling his gaze between Rupali's eyes. First left, then right, and then left again, in cycles, and then faster cycles. It appeared as if he was going to explode in anger. And then, all of a sudden, the wild dance of his eyes came to rest. Else what? Say that again, he hissed. Rupali repeated, else, I will have to bring this matter to the principal's notice. Mahajan took a moment to digest what he had heard yet again. The next moment he flung his hand in the air. In a split second his palm landed on Rupali's cheek. The slap resounded in Rupali's eardrums. That was the only thing she could hear in that instant. The impact was so strong that Rupali fell. Rahima screamed and rushed to help Rupali. When she held Rupali's shoulders, apart from feeling mortified, nothing else registered in her mind. She blamed herself for what had just occurred. In the shock of that moment, she got down on her knees in front of Professor Mahajan and begged him to pardon her. She cried in front of the professor, pleading that Rupali was just a kid. Mahajan didn't bother to respond or even look at Rahima. He knew whom he had to break down. He knew who his real enemy was. When Rupali got back on her feet, she pulled Rahima away from Mahajan, stopping her from pleading in front of him. She looked back at the professor. Go tell the principal now. Mahajan retorted, picked up his belongings, and left.